They gave him a shattered blade and a fading guardian. What he forged changed everything. The world of Vera carried the tang of scorched copper and old sorrow, a taste Rowan knew well, the flavor of every exile's planet orbiting the edge of known space. Every breath filled his lungs with reminders, a bitterness that lingered on the tongue, a sting that crept into the marrow. His workshop was both his refuge and his cage, the only place that truly belonged to him. Its walls pressed close, crowded with battered tools and the ghosts of too many failed creations. The wavering glow of furnace light painted everything in restless orange. Here, among twisted metal and lost dreams, Rowan was more than a craftsman. He was a mender of what the universe had left behind. He barely looked up as the sky outside bruised with color. The sound came first, a low, thrumming vibration that rippled through the ground, rattling old shelves and setting every metal scrap trembling. Rowan set his hammer down, the calluses on his hands catching the light. He waited, silent, as the shadow fell across his workshop, a Solarian cruiser, obsidian and gold, descending with mechanical grace. Its hull caught the teal sky and shattered it into molten reflections. The ship settled in a storm of dust and displaced air, dwarfing his ramshackle home with its impossible elegance. He wiped soot from his palms, slow and deliberate, refusing to let his hands shake. He already knew who had come. Magistrate Dravik. The name was a wound he'd learned to live with. The workshop doors parted to reveal Dravik himself. Tall and impassive, swathed in ceremonial indigo that shimmered with forbidden authority. At his side, two armored sentinels moved with predatory precision, visors blank and unyielding. One sentinel stepped forward, setting a reinforced case onto Rowan's workbench. The click of its latches echoed, final as a judge's sentence. Dravik's lips curled into something cold and unsmiling. "You will attempt this," he said, voice as polished as cut obsidian. "The Silith, an heirloom of the Solarian line. The galaxy's best have tried and failed. I trust, for your sake, you will succeed where others did not." Inside the case, fragments of a blade rested on black velvet. Opaline shards shimmered with fractured energy, refracting the light into ghostly spectra. Even broken, the blade's presence was undeniable, a promise or a threat, waiting to be fulfilled. Its energy core was dark, a dead heart. A second case opened, and the sentinels brought forth something else, a girl, more carried than led. She was tall, slender, her skin pale as moonstone, her fiery red hair tangled and matted, feline ears flat against her skull. Her luminous green eyes were clouded with pain, and a long, graceful tail curled protectively around her trembling frame. She swayed, barely conscious, as Dravik's gaze passed over her like a cold wind. "This is Sirail," Dravik announced, each syllable heavy with threat. "The Blade's guardian. Her life and the Silith's are bound. She remains until the work is done. Fail and you lose everything. Your workshop, your payment, her. Restore the blade within a lunar cycle." He let the words settle like a shroud, then nodded to his sentinels. "Let us leave the craftsman to his task." The cruiser's engines whined, stirring the copper-scented air. Dravik and his retinue vanished into the ship's maw, and the vessel lifted away in a shimmering pulse of gold, leaving only silence and the hiss of cooling metal. For a moment Rowan stood rooted, his chest tight, staring at the fragments on his bench and the girl slumped on his floor. Two broken beings left in his care. He moved to Sirail's side, slow and careful. Her breathing was shallow, each exhale a tremor. He brushed tangled red hair from her fevered brow, feeling heat radiate from her skin. The broken hum of the blade pulsed within her, a discordant echo that made his bones ache. Rowan's jaw tightened. "I won't let you die here," he murmured, voice rough as gravel. He lifted her, impossibly light in his arms, and carried her to the narrow cot in the back of the workshop. A clean blanket, scratchy but warm, was tucked over her. He found a battered tin cup and filled it with broth, its aroma mingling with the scent of hot metal and burning resin. Siriel woke to this. Unexpected warmth instead of oblivion. For a moment, confusion flickered in her eyes. She lay cocooned in shadow and light, her world reduced to the creak of Rowan's boots, the hiss of the furnace, the ache in her chest. The human moved nearby, shirt rolled to his elbows, forearms streaked with soot and old scars. He glanced over, his eyes assessing but not unkind. "Drink this," he said, offering the cup. His hand was steady as he guided hers, rough but gentle. She tried to lift the cup, but her hands shook violently. Rowan's grip closed around hers, steadying her as she drank. The broth burned its way down, spreading fragile warmth. She coughed, voice a rasp. "It's pointless. You can't fix what's lost." He met her gaze, a wry spark in his eyes. "Nothing's truly lost until you stop looking for it." He returned to the bench, selecting the first of the blade's shards, holding it up to the light. Its fractured edge shimmered, singing a broken, silent note that set Siriel's teeth on edge. Rowan worked with gloved hands and patient heat, not trusting machines for something this delicate. He set a piece into the forge, coaxing the metal toward pliancy, watching for the subtle shift that meant the energy within still lived. As the shard heated, Siriel's eyes flew wide. She cried out, back arching from the cot, a spasm of pain rippling through her frame. Rowan stopped instantly, turning to her. "Hey, I've got you," he said, voice low and resonant. He set aside the shard, then began to hum. A low, steady note, almost a vibration. The sound was ancient, grounding, its rhythm matching the pulse of the forge. Siriel's breathing slowed, the pain ebbed, receding like a tide. Exhausted, she slumped back against the pillow. Her vision blurred, but she watched him work, his movements confident and sure, an anchor in the shifting dark. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Rowan's silhouette, haloed by firelight, hands moving over broken pieces, as if, just this once, he might mend what the universe had left behind. Time slipped by, measured in the shifting light and the rhythm of Rowan's hammer. In the beginning, the days blurred, pale mornings seeping into molten afternoons, dusk stretching into the long hush of night, punctuated only by the distant calls of Vera's wild things and the pulse of the forge. An unspoken routine formed, stitched together by necessity and something gentler, neither of them named. Siriel's strength returned, slow as the thaw of winter. The tremors in her hands faded until they were little more than a memory. Some mornings she woke to find Rowan crouched at her side, already checking the bandages on her wrists, adjusting her blanket with hands calloused but gentle. He never pressed her to speak. He simply cared. Fresh broth, a damp cloth for her brow, the steady presence of someone who expected nothing in return. She watched him from the cot, entranced by the interplay of firelight and muscle, the way the lines of his body shifted with every measured strike, every turn of the blade's fragments. There was a grace to him, even in exhaustion, a quiet, unyielding strength. The care in his every movement made something inside her loosen, something she'd kept buried for so long that she'd forgotten what it was to feel safe. A warmth stirred in her chest, strange and frightening and impossibly gentle. Rowan learned her patterns as if they were his own. He marked the way edge fragments of the blade triggered sharp stabs behind her eyes, while core pieces sent a deep ache blooming through her chest. He adapted, alternating his work, never pushing too far at once. When the pain came, he would hum. Always that low, resonant note, a thread of sound that wrapped around her and soothed the discord. He never showed impatience, only quiet resolve, as if he had all the time in the world to wait for her strength to match his own. One evening, after a grueling session that left the air thick with the scent of molten metal, Rowan slumped onto the low stool by her cot, wiping sweat from his brow. Sirael watched him in the uncertain light, her throat tight with questions she'd never dared ask before. "Why?" she whispered at last, her voice thin as spider silk. "Why do you care? Dravik left me to die." He stared at the shards on his workbench, jaw flexing. "Nothing is truly broken," he said quietly. "Just out of harmony. To mend it, I have to learn its melody." He turned to her then, eyes dark and honest. "And its melody is yours." For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick and charged. Sirael felt her guard falter, the walls she'd built crumbling in the face of his unspoken kindness. For the first time, she was tempted to share the secrets she'd guarded so long. The air between them seemed to hum with possibility. A glance held too long, a hand brushing another's. The heat of the forge mirrored in the heat that curled low in her belly. The days narrowed to the edge of the possible, anticipation building as Rowan prepared for the hardest task yet. Joining the largest fragments, the heart of the break. He cleared the workbench, hands moving with ritual care. Siriel hovered nearby, unable to hide the tension in her posture, her tail coiling tight around her ankles. He laid out the opaline shards on a bed of black velvet, the fractured energy in them already vibrating through the workshop. Rowan slipped on his insulated gloves, checked the alignment of the pieces, then glanced at Siriel. She was biting her lip, ears angled forward in anxiety. "Please be careful, Rowan," she said softly. It was the first time she'd spoken his name, and the sound of it in her mouth felt fragile, perfect. A small, shining intimacy. He met her gaze, and something unspoken flickered between them. "I will," he promised. He set the shards in the forge, coaxing them toward the point of fusion. The energy backlash, when it came, was sudden and brutal. The workshop filled with a roar, a sound that pressed into bone, rattling shelves and scattering tools. Sirael convulsed, a cry torn from her throat as pain lanced through her. Rowan, struck by the surge, staggered but didn't hesitate. He rushed to her side, dropping to his knees and pressing his palm to her forehead. "Stay with me, Sirael," he shouted over the din, his voice raw. The world unraveled, swept into a torrent of light and memory. In the instant their skin met, they were pulled under, minds linked by the blade's fractured power. Memories flooded through them, Siriel as a child, running barefoot through the crystal groves of Lysara, laughter echoing in the air, the forging of the Silith, its blade a living pulse, woven with the energy of her people. Rowan saw her training, saw the way the blade responded to her touch, saw the moment it was shattered, Dravik's cold smile as he twisted the hilt and broke the bond. He saw Dravik's betrayal in searing detail, the siphoning of Sirael's life, her royal heritage twisted and drained through the Silith's broken core. The blade was more than a weapon. It was a legacy, a key to a destiny Dravik wanted for himself. Rowan glimpsed the sanctuary of Lysara, its gates sealed by the blade's energy, its people waiting for a return that might never come. The memories washed through them in a storm. Siriel's loneliness, her desperate hope, the moment she realized she was nothing more than a means to an end in Dravik's eyes. Rowan's own exile, the faces he'd left behind, the relentless need to mend what others discarded. The current bound them together, two broken melodies seeking harmony. When the surge finally ebbed, they tumbled back into themselves, gasping, trembling, sweat cooling on their skin. Siriel's hand found Rowan's, fingers curling around his with desperate force. Their secrets hung in the air, no longer barriers but bridges. Siriel broke the silence, voice shaky but sure. The blade is the key to Lysara's sanctuary, the last hope for my kind. Dravik tried to bypass its safeguards, to use me, my life, to seize the power hidden there. He thought breaking the Silith would break me. Rowan's jaw set, eyes burning with a resolve that left no room for doubt. He was wrong. We'll finish this. The reforging is our only hope. Siriel finished, voice trembling with conviction. She drew a shuddering breath. The sanctuary was sealed generations ago after the war. Only the true heir bearing the Silith can open it. Dravik. He was never meant to rule. He wanted the blade but couldn't claim it without me. He broke it, thinking to bend me to his will, but it only strengthened the bond. I am its guardian. I am the last. Rowan squeezed her hand. And you're not alone now. For the first time, Siriel allowed herself to believe it. In the charged hush of the forge, with the scent of hot metal and old sorrow swirling around them, their mission crystallized, no longer imposed from without, but chosen. The reforging was no longer Dravik's demand. It was their shared purpose, their chance at redemption, their defiance. Rowan brushed his thumb across the back of her hand, voice soft but unbreakable. We'll make it whole again, together. Their eyes met, and in that moment, nothing seemed impossible. The work continued, now as partners. Siriel, propped up against the anvil, drew in a trembling breath and let song pour from her lips. Ancient harmonies, spun from the memory of her ancestors and the pulse of the Silith itself. Her voice shimmered in the heated air, weaving through the workshop, a balm to the blade's fractured essence. Rowan became her guide, his hand steadying hers as they shaped the glowing metal together, fingers twining over hilt and tang, steel and opaline. Their bodies moved in sync, his strength anchoring her, her song guiding his every motion. Each brush of skin sent a silent current through them, humming beneath the forge's roar. They moved as if they had always known each other. Rowan pressed the latest fragment into the coals, turning it until the hue was just right, then nodded to Siriel. She sang a high, keening note, and the color deepened, energy settling into the metal's core. He helped her lift the tongs, and together, they quenched the glowing shard in oil. The sizzle was followed by a resonant tone, pure and lingering, echoing through the cluttered workshop and vibrating in their bones. The Silith responded. Where once chaos had reigned within its pieces, now the energy coalesced. Brilliance pushing out the darkness, piece by piece. Siriel's green eyes, luminous and intent, met Rowan's over the blade. Each glance forged another invisible thread between them. Each shared breath drew them closer, their hearts beating in tandem with the rhythm of hammer and song. Their hands, so different, one broad and scarred, the other slender and alien, fit together perfectly as they worked. Rowan's voice, rough and steady, sometimes joined hers, a deep harmony to her light. When she faltered, he steadied her, fingers grazing her wrist or her shoulder, always careful, always gentle. Sparks danced around them, but none shone as brightly as the silent understanding that passed between them. Then, without warning, the shrill wail of the proximity alarm split the air. The workbench rattled as the sound echoed, and both of them froze. A glance through the grimy viewport confirmed their worst fear. A Solarian shuttle, black and gold, descending fast. Dravik had returned, sooner than expected. Panic flickered in Siriel's eyes. Rowan squeezed her hand. The blade is nearly whole, he said, urgency sharpening his voice. We just need the core. She nodded, swallowing hard. The melody must be flawless, she whispered, voice trembling with exhaustion and dread. Rowan retrieved the core crystal, a swirling violet gem, alive with trapped lightning. He pressed it into Sirael's palm, his own hand enfolding hers. "Then sing it with me," he said, voice full of trust. "We do this together." Boots pounded against the earth outside. The shuttle's hatch hissed open. Dravik's guards, clad in obsidian armor, stormed the workshop, weapons drawn. Rowan's world narrowed to the heat of the forge, the chill of the blade, and Sirael's trembling voice. Rowan snatched up his smith's hammer, squaring his shoulders as the first guard lunged. He moved with raw determination, every muscle taut as steel. He ducked a plasma bolt, swung his hammer in a wide arc, catching the assailant's helmet and sending him sprawling. Another guard rushed him, and Rowan used the cluttered environment to his advantage, kicking a crate into the attacker's path, dodging behind the furnace as shots scorched the air. He fought with the desperation of a man with everything to lose. Sirael, focused and pale but unyielding, pressed the core crystal into the hilt. Her song rose over the chaos, a haunting, wordless melody that made the air itself tremble. She set the gem, hands steady despite the battle raging behind her, voice climbing higher, weaving a setting song as old as her people. The energy surge that followed was immense. Arcs of green and violet lightning leaped from the blade, crawling up her arms and making her hair fan out like a halo. Rowan, nearly overcome by the heat and the relentless assault, stumbled back as the lead guard took aim, weapon crackling with lethal energy. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to slow. Rowan locked eyes with Sirael, and she sang the final note, voice clear and unwavering. Light exploded outward in a wave of emerald brilliance, flooding the workshop. The guards collapsed where they stood, armor sparking, weapons falling from nerveless hands. The radiance bathed everything in unearthly color, and for a breathless moment, the world was still. Sirael rose from the workbench, the completed blade cradled in her hands. Her form was transformed, her posture regal, her eyes blazing with power, her presence commanding the space. The fatigue and pain had fallen away, replaced by a strength older than memory. She turned to Rowan and, with a small, triumphant smile, tossed the blade to him. Rowan's hand closed around the hilt. As he did, he felt a flood of emotions, gratitude, hope, love, rushing through him, carried on the blade's pulse. The Silith sang with the harmony of two souls mended and bound. Dravik strode into the ruined workshop, arrogance still etched in every line of his face, only to freeze as he took in the sight before him, the radiant Sirael, the completed Silith in Rowan's grasp, the disabled guards. His confidence crumbled, replaced by fear. Rowan stepped forward, the blade glowing brighter with every step. "Your time is over, Dravik," he said, voice ringing with finality. Dravik's mask shattered. He stumbled back, eyes wide. You don't know what you're doing. That power is mine by right." Sirael's voice cut through the air, regal and cold. "No, Dravik. You were never worthy. You only ever took, never created." Dravik turned and ran, his ambitions dissolving into dust as he fled the workshop, leaving his guards and his grand plans behind. In the aftermath, as the last echoes of battle faded and the green light dimmed, Rowan let the Silith fall gently onto the workbench. He turned to Sirael, breath coming in short, uneven bursts, the adrenaline finally fading. She stood before him, changed, whole, radiant. Their tension finally broke. Rowan crossed the space between them in a heartbeat, cupping her cheek with a hand still trembling from the fight. "You're whole again," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Sirael leaned into his touch, eyes shining. "So are you," she replied. Her lips met his, fierce and searching, a release of all the fear, longing, and hope they had carried. The kiss was a promise and a victory, a forging of their own making. Later, as Rowan gently tended the scrapes on Sirael's arms and wiped away the last traces of battle, Their words turned to the future. "I must return to my people," Sirael said softly, fingers tracing the hilt of the Silith. "They need me. To rebuild. To heal what Dravik tried to destroy." Rowan met her gaze, understanding reflected in his eyes. "You'll have me by your side. I won't just repair anymore. I want to create with you." Her smile was luminous, fragile, and fierce at once. "Together, then. We'll forge a new path." Their hands found each other, fingers entwined, as the first rays of dawn crept through the battered workshop. The past was mended, the future unshaped and waiting. Anew, together. Weeks passed. The air of regret that had once haunted them was swept away by the crisp promise of a world awakening from centuries of slumber. Every sunrise over Lysara's crystalline towers brought a new light, one that shimmered off silent spires and glassy plazas, painting the dormant city in hues of hope. Where once the sanctuary had been little more than a beautiful shell, now it pulsed, softly, tentatively, with the energy of lives returning. Sirael stood on the highest balcony, looking out over the world she had once only seen in dreams. She was no longer frail, her movements no longer tentative. She stood poised and strong, her crimson hair unfurling in the morning wind, her feline ears perked to every distant sound. The Silith blade rested at her hip, as much a part of her as her breath. Rowan stood at her side, transformed by love and purpose. His hands, always so sure, now bore the memory of forging not just metal, but a future. What had been his workshop was now Lysara's geothermal heart, a humming place beneath the city, where the planet's energy could be shaped and guided. Their intimacy was a quiet constant, a hand in hand as they walked the mosaic corridors, a glance exchanged across a crowded plaza, a shoulder leaned into when hope wavered. They had built something neither could name, but both felt in the marrow. Survivors began to emerge, descendants of Sirael's people, drawn by the flicker of returning power. They came warily, their eyes hollow at first, but soon filling with cautious hope. To Sirael, they looked as to a queen. To Rowan, they looked as to the foundation of a new world. Yet Lysara was not yet whole. The sanctuary's systems stuttered, ancient knowledge lost in the long sleep. The lights flickered and faded, fountains sputtered and ran dry, gardens languished in half-shadow. It was a beautiful shell, yearning for life. In the sunken gardens, elders gathered to pray at the base of the heart spire, their voices weaving through the crystal air. They called on the old powers, desperate for renewal. Sirael had tried everything she knew: whispered words, ancient rituals, the blade's pulse. But the systems would not revive. She returned to Rowan's side, frustration etching lines between her brows. "I have failed them," she said softly, her hands twisting in her lap. "The city does not hear me." Rowan knelt before her, his touch gentle but unwavering. "Machines don't die, Sirael," he said. "They just need healing." He offered his hand, and when she took it, he pressed the Silith's hilt into her palm. "Let's try together." They descended into the geothermal heart, where rivers of molten stone pulsed beneath crystal conduits, and the air shimmered with dormant energy. Sirael's song echoed off the walls, a melody of awakening. Rowan moved beside her, his intuition leading him from one fractured node to another, feeling for the subtle pulse of resistance, the blockage, the scar that kept Lysara sleeping. "Here," he murmured, his fingers pressed to the cold surface of a conduit. "It's like a wound, festering for centuries." She closed her eyes, tuning her senses to the flow of energy. "I feel it. A darkness, like ice in the blood." Rowan's grip tightened on the Silith. "We heal it together. Your song, my hands." They found the main conduit, a vast chamber at the city's core. In the center stood a towering crystal pillar, its facets clouded and dark, a dormant heart awaiting the spark of life. Cyril and Rowan stood on opposite sides of the pillar, the Silith blade held between them. Cyril's voice began as a whisper, uncertain, then grew, notes spiraling around the pillar, threading through crystal and stone. The song was old, a memory passed down through her line, the melody of renewal. Rowan closed his eyes, feeling her song vibrate through the blade, through his bones. He poured his own energy into the circuit, his will to mend, his love, his faith in her. Their energies met in the Silith, twining together in a circuit of trust and love. The blade glowed, first a gentle green, then brighter, until it blazed between them. The blockage within the conduit shuddered, darkness fracturing as the melody pierced it. Cyril's voice soared, Rowan's hand steadying the blade, channeling the surge. The pillar flickered, pulsed, then flared with light. Energy roared through the chamber, spiraling up the crystal column and racing outward through the city's veins. Lights blossomed in the towers above, fountains surged, the air grew sweet with the scent of blooming flowers. Life returned to Lysara, vivid, unstoppable. Cyril staggered, breathless, and Rowan rushed to catch her. She leaned into him, laughter bubbling up, the relief and triumph too great to contain. The sanctuary's heart beat strong once more, powered not only by ancient technology but by their partnership, his skill, her bond, their hope. They emerged from the geothermal heart into a city reborn. People spilled from the towers and plazas, voices rising in joy, in disbelief. The elders wept at the base of the heart spire. Children danced in the restored fountains. Cyril lifted her chin, eyes shining, and addressed her people in a voice that rang clear as the new day. "We are home," she said. "Lysara lives." "And so do we." Rowan stood at her side, their hands entwined. The future was uncharted, but together, they would shape it. The sanctuary's pulse matched their own, a world and a love, both awakened. Light flooded the gardens for the first time in centuries. It poured through the crystalline domes, refracted in rainbow arcs across the marble paths and shimmering leaves, stirring color and movement in every hidden corner of Lysara. Flowers long dormant opened to the warmth. Fountains bubbled with living water, and laughter, startled and bright, rose on the morning air. Cyril's people gathered, drawn from towers and sunken halls, emerging blinking and amazed into the new day. Their faces were changed. The haunted look of survivors was yielding to something softer, more open. Elders stood with children, families joined hands, and the hush that first fell was not one of mourning, but awe. The silence broke as voices lifted in song, not the keening laments of the old days, but melodies threaded with joy and hope. The music wound through the gardens, echoed from glass walls, and filled the city with a sense of belonging that had been lost for generations. Cyril stood before them, Rowan at her side. The Silith blade hung sheathed at her hip, its opaline hilt gleaming in the sun, a symbol not of war, but of unity, hope, and the promise of renewal. She looked out over the crowd, her feline ears flicking at the sound of the children's laughter, her green eyes reflecting the light of the new Lysara. She raised her voice, clear and unwavering. "We stand together, not as shadows clinging to memory, but as people of this world, alive, unbroken. Our past is our root, but our future is ours to shape. We will build anew, forged from memory and hope." She paused, and her gaze swept the crowd. "Let the Silith be not only a blade, but a beacon. Let us make this sanctuary a home for all who remain." The crowd erupted in cheers. Hands rose, voices joined, and for the first time in memory the sound was not sorrowful, but jubilant. Rowan felt the surge of hope pass through him, grounding him in this place, these people, this woman beside him. He watched Sirael, her face alight with possibility, her strength no longer forged in solitude, but in shared purpose. After the celebration, as dusk painted the city in deep blues and violet shadows, Sirael and Rowan withdrew to their balcony high above the plaza. The world below sparkled with life, lights flickered in towers, music drifted from open windows, and the gardens glowed under the first starlight. Rowan leaned against the crystal balustrade, feeling Sirael's warmth at his side, her tail curling lazily around his wrist. Sirael let out a long, contented sigh. It feels almost unreal, doesn't it? Her voice was soft, almost shy in the hush of evening. I grew up hearing stories of this place. I never believed I would see it live again. Rowan smiled, his hand finding hers. You brought them home, Sirael. This is your legacy. She squeezed his fingers, but her gaze grew distant. A messenger drone hummed near, casting a pale blue light as it relayed news from the outer reaches, reports of Dravik, still alive, consolidating power where Lysara's light could not yet reach. He wielded unstable energy, sowing fear among scattered colonies, his ambitions undimmed. Rowan frowned, concern knitting his brow. He's not finished, is he? Sirael shook her head, the lines of her face hardening with resolve. He is a storm on the horizon, but he will not define us. My world is not a memory in a crystal tomb. It is here, now, in every voice that sings, in every child that runs free. She turned to Rowan, her love shining fierce and certain. He can rage in the darkness, we have the dawn. She stepped close, reaching up to cup Rowan's jaw in her hand. Her thumb brushed over the line of his cheek, gentle and reverent. You are my home, Rowan. Not this city, not the blade, not even Lysara itself. Wherever you are, I belong. He drew her into his arms, the weight of all they'd endured pressed between them, and then, with a sigh, released. He kissed her, slow and certain, as the city exhaled around them. The world faded to the quiet of two hearts beating in promise, a promise of shared dawns, of a future to build, of hope reclaimed and made whole. Their embrace lingered, silent and unbreakable. When they parted, Sirael pressed her forehead to his. We have been given broken pieces, a blade, a life, a world. Her voice trembled with emotion, but her words were clear. And together, we have forged a new beginning. Rowan smiled, his eyes shining. A love that will echo through legend. They stood together, looking out over Lysara, the city pulsing with new life. Below, their people sang and danced beneath the stars, unafraid. Above, the future spread out before them, unknown but theirs to shape. And in the heart of it all, Sirael and Rowan, two souls mended, two hearts intertwined, stood at the threshold of legend, ready to meet the dawn. Their work was only beginning. As the jubilation of Lysara's awakening faded to a purposeful hum, Rowan rose with the first light, sleeves rolled, hands quick and sure. The city had survived its long sleep, but everywhere were the wounds of centuries, silent fountains, tangled pipes, air processors choked with dust and memory. Rowan led the charge, his mind mapping every circuit and conduit, his voice clear and patient as he gathered Sirael's people around him. He taught them how to rebuild, not only how to mend cracked turbines or coax water through corroded channels, but how to reclaim their place in a world reborn. The Lysarans watched, at first uncertain, then eager, learning to wield tools in place of old sorrows. Rowan's presence steadied them, the rhythm of his work infectious. Children brought him fractured tiles and broken gears, their eyes wide with hope as he showed them how to piece the world back together. Elders, once resigned to loss, found pride in the feel of new wrought stone beneath their hands. At every turning, Siriel was there. She moved among her people not only as a queen, but as a leader shaped by fire. Her laughter lifted spirits, her counsel soothed the anxious, and her resolve inspired even the weary. When she walked beside Rowan, the bond between them was unmistakable. A quiet force that drew others in, made the impossible seem possible. Together, they were the living heart of this new world, each glance and touch a subtle reminder that healing came not just from mending stone, but from the love that pulsed between them. In the deep halls where the sanctuary's wounds ran deepest, Rowan and Sirael repeated their most sacred ritual. They descended into the humming dark, the Silith blade cradled between them. Rowan's hand on the hilt, Sirael's fingers woven with his, they stood on either side of the cracked conduits. Sirael's song rose, clear and ancient, and Rowan's will steadied the flow of energy. Together, they channeled healing light, energy flowing through their joined hands into the blade, then radiating outward into the city's sleeping heart. Each time their connection deepened, a shared intimacy that moved beyond touch or even words. It was a merging of will and soul, a dance in which their breaths, their hopes, their very beings aligned. The city responded. Lights flickered awake, the great engines shuddered and hummed, gardens blossomed in vibrant color. The rivers that wound through Lysara's plazas ran clear once more, reflecting the twin figures at their heart, a queen and a smith, partners in every sense. When the work paused, they found each other in the gardens, hands entwined, the gentle murmur of water and the rustle of blooming leaves all around. Sometimes Rowan would press his forehead to Sirael's, and the world would fall away, leaving only the pulse of their joined hearts. Other times, Sirael would rest her head on his shoulder, her tail flicking lazily, her trust in him as sure as the sunrise. "Do you remember," Sirael asked one evening, "when we first came here? This place felt so empty. Now listen." She closed her eyes, letting the sounds of laughter and song wash over her. Lysara breathes again. Rowan brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear, voice gentle. "It breathes because of you, because of us." He paused, then smiled. "Though I never thought I'd teach a city of royals how to fix a hydraulic valve." She laughed, the sound low and intimate. "I never thought I'd love a man whose hands were always stained with grease and hope." Her eyes softened. "But I wouldn't change a thing." Their partnership became the sanctuary's hope, his skill and vision, her unique bond to the city's heart. When a new crisis arose, a collapsed aqueduct, a failing energy cell, Sirael would gather her people with steady words, and Rowan would lead the repair teams, turning problems into opportunities for unity. They did not rule from above, but among, teaching by example, forging trust with every victory. In the main conduit chamber, where the city's fate was once decided, they repeated their greatest triumph. Standing on either side of the towering crystal pillar, the Silith blade between them, they formed a living circuit of power and faith. Sirael's voice sang the song of renewal, notes rising in spirals, echoing off crystal walls. Rowan pressed his energy through the blade, their souls connecting in a surge that set the pillar ablaze with light. The city thrummed, alive and eager for its new future. With each ritual, their connection grew, not only in the public gaze, but in the quiet moments they carved out for themselves. At dusk, as nebula light painted the towers in streams of violet and rose, they would slip away to the highest balcony. There, arms entwined, they watched the world they were creating, towers gleaming, gardens alive, people laughing, the past and future meeting in the hush of twilight. Siriel leaned into Rowan, her hand resting over his heart, feeling the steady, grounding rhythm that had become her anchor. "You are my sanctuary, Rowan," she whispered, her voice fierce with love and certainty. He looked down at her, his eyes shining with everything they had built. He kissed her, slow, sure, a testament to all they had endured and all they would become. The city below sparkled, their people's voices drifting up to join the stars. In that embrace, they were more than rulers. They were the first legend of the reborn Lissarans, living proof that love and creation could heal even the deepest wounds. The forge was quiet now, but their journey, their love, had only just begun. And in the bright heart of Lissara, anything was possible. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.